I could have lost every limb on my body and I still would have been me. I'm the same person. I'm super determined. I'm competitive. I want to do my best.
The Profile. You're listening to Premier Christian Radio.
Hello and welcome to The Profile here on Premier Christian Radio. This week we've got a special interview for you. Stef Reid is a Paralympian representing Team GB and she just finished 4th in the long jump. She was an agonising 3 centimetres away from a medal. But Stef Reid has a wonderful story to tell about her own Christian faith. And we recorded this interview with her before the Tokyo Olympics. So let's listen in to this interview with the multiple medal winner at the European and world level, Stef Reid. She's been speaking to Premier's Rachel Matthews.
Hello and welcome to The Profile here on Premier Christian Radio with me, Rachel Matthews. This is the show where we look at a person's life, faith and testimony, and it's brought to you in association with the UK's leading Christian magazine, Premier Christianity. If you would like to receive a free copy of the latest issue, featuring interviews, features, news, reviews and more, then head to premierchristianity.com/free sample. My guest today is Stef Reid. Stef Reid is a Paralympic long jumper who competes for Great Britain. A 5-time world record holder, reigning world champion and triple Paralympic medalist in the long jump and the 200-metre sprint. Stef has an honours degree in biochemistry, and away from the track she works as a broadcaster, professional speaker, actor, model, and she was also a finalist on Celebrity MasterChef 2018. Stef's talent and passion for sport were spotted early, and at 12 she was already dreaming of playing rugby on the world stage. But at 15, Stef was involved in a boating accident. She suffered severe propeller lacerations, and her life was saved, but her right foot was amputated. Stef has leaned into God throughout her journey, and like many in the Bible has had moments of anger, disbelief, questioning, amazement and glory. I met up with Stef at Loughborough University, where she's currently training for the Tokyo Olympics, and I asked her about when her love for sport began.
I have loved sport for as long as I can remember. One of my very first, sporting memories was actually watching the Hawaii Ironman. And just, I don't know what it was. I've always been a really active child. I just love, moving and running and just that feeling of pushing yourself to physical exertion. I don't know, it's just really satisfying. And I was also really, really competitive. And I think a lot of people can misinterpret what competitive means. But for me, it was just about that challenge every day. I love learning. I've always had a lot of energy and I just always wanted an outlet, for that aggression, which, also as a girl, as a female, you don't always get. And for me, sport was just that release. I just loved it. And I played everything. So the school that I went to, actually it was great. We had a lot of offerings, in terms of sport and I would play everything, from cross country to basketball to tennis to football, volleyball. I just really enjoyed it.
Just anything that you could do, but you had a particular heart for rugby, is that right?
Yes. So when I was 12, I was introduced to rugby. And for me, that was just, there's just nothing better than, running up and down a field covered in mud as you're training and on the pitch when you're competing. And it really was the sport for me that showcased the fullness of my abilities. It was just a perfect fit for me. And I was a scrum half, and I just loved everything about it. And I thought, okay, this is it. I found the sport that I want to do. I want to excel in it. I want to play internationally. And I thought that was where my life was going to go.
Goodness me, so those are really big dreams for that sport.
It was, and I think I just liked the fact it was quite an unusual sport, for women to play, and it was a challenge.
And running parallel with that, Did you grow up with a faith in God?
Did I grow up with a faith in God? Yes. I grew up with a knowledge of God. My family wasn't particularly religious. Faith wasn't a huge part of our life. We would go to church, and I think both my parents, believed in God and something. But actually, unusually, we ended up going to a private Christian school. So a lot of what I knew and a lot of my faith influence actually came at school, and I knew the Bible really well. We studied that, memorized lots of scripture. But in terms of whether or not it really internalized, I wouldn't say it had, and part of that is just because I think it's a big commitment, and as a child things get simple, and as you get older things get a lot more complicated. And your faith becomes a lot more nuanced, and you have more questions, and you face tougher situations. And I think it does take a degree of maturity to develop, and I hadn't quite reached that yet.
So you knew about God. He was kind of in the background almost, although perhaps it hadn't become a personal, deep commitment to you, but God was definitely sort of around and with you. And then you were 14, were you, when you had an accident?
Yeah, so actually I was 15, and it's funny, I said I wanted an adventure with rugby, and I definitely got an adventure, just not the one I wanted. And so I was actually up at a friend's cottage for it was a bank holiday weekend, and their cottage happened to be on a beautiful lake north of Toronto, and they had a boat, and we spent much of the weekend on the boat, but also doing this really fun activity which it's called tubing. So basically you attach a rubber inner tube to the back of a powerboat, and it tows you, and you go flying across the water, and it's super fun, and you fall off occasionally, the boat comes back, you get back on, you keep going. And it would have been on the Monday when my parents were coming back to get me later that afternoon, and we decided to go out one last morning, just because we wouldn't be able to do it again for a long time. And as usual, we was on the tube, and then I fell off, and I was waiting to get picked back up by the boat. But I knew something was not right that time. I could just tell, that boat is coming. It's coming way too fast, and I knew the driver, he doesn't see me. And I mean, your body's amazing. You just switch into survival mode, and there wasn't really that much emotion attached to it. It was just like, right, what are your options? Because you really need to miss that propeller, or you're going to die. And I looked at the boat. I was a great swimmer. I was on the swim team, but I knew, okay, I don't have enough time to swim to either side. I'll still get caught in the wake of the propellers. And so I thought my best bet was, this is fine. I'll just surface dive. I'll dive below the boat. I'll get as far below it as I can, and then I'll just resurface once I'm confident it's gone up. And so I went to dive down, but just totally forgot I had a life jacket on, and I couldn't get under. And at that point, there just was no time. And there's just not much you can do except hope for the best. And I swear, I remember the whole thing. And I remember it was just really dark. I was disorientated. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know which way was up. And then at some point I could just feel my lungs I'm like, I need to get up. Otherwise, I'm going to drown. And I resurfaced, and it was quite weird. I remember people on the boat, panicking and really worried. And I was just kind of like, guys, I'm fine. I'm like, wow, that was really close. Probably let's not tell our parents about that. And then it was this wave of very much, I'm not fine, but I don't know why. And I remember, I don't know, I just felt funny, and I remember just reaching down, just to check, is everything okay? And that's when I realized that I had big lacerations to my lower back, and I actually thought I had been cut in half at that point, and that was when the shock kind of kicked in. And And it was really scary because we were in the middle of nowhere. And even I knew this is a lot of blood. You need a blood transfusion. And they pulled me on the boat. And that was kind of when everyone saw the extent. And I remember trying to sit up and somebody kept shoving my shoulder down. I was getting really annoyed. Like, I just want to sit up. But they just didn't want me to see, what was going on. And I remember, eventually they got me into an ambulance, and that was, I could see in everyone's face, this is not good. And that was when the possibility of death, really crossed my mind. And I remember, growing up as a teenager and kind of having this internal conversation with myself. Yes, God is there. Yeah, I'm kind of scared of him. Yeah, I'd kind of like to go to heaven. But equally, I'm really enjoying my life right now. I kind of want to do things my way. I'll tell you what, God, how about we just kind of coexist together for a little bit? And then when I have a family and, when I have time, maybe then I'll start, kind of doing things your way and exploring. And then I was in this position where there was no more time. And that was really scary. And I felt this deep sense of, I've not done life well. And it wasn't, from the outside, I don't think anyone else would have felt like that. I was an A+ student, had lots of friends, did well in school, and it wasn't like I, had gone out and done a load of, really, really horrific things. But the point was I had not done, I had never asked God what he wanted for my life. I had never acknowledged him. I'd never honored him. I'd never really lived in light of just huge gratitude for the grace he was showering on me every single day, and I just didn't realize it. And that moment hit me really hard, because I knew that if I had died in that moment, I was probably going to be one of those people where I said, hey, God, it's me. And he was going to say, I don't know you. And that was terrifying. And I prayed in that ambulance, genuinely for the first time, God save me. I have no recourse right now, and I desperately want another chance to do things right. And he heard that prayer. And it was funny, actually, later on, I found out just the number of people that were praying for me during those, really intense 12 hours. And, things went as well as they possibly could. I made it to the hospital, and they did the surgery, and, it was really difficult surgery. They actually ended up bringing in, it's bank holiday weekend. And of course, my mom's biggest fear was, oh my gosh, no one's going to be working at the hospital. Like, who is she going to get? A trainee doctor? But actually, they ended up bringing in the best orthopedic surgeon in the country. He cut his holiday short, and they brought him in. And my injuries were quite complicated, particularly the one on my back. You can imagine it's a massive, dirty, open wound that you need to find a way to put back together. But you know what? I woke up from surgery and I had no spinal damage, and I was fine. And I thought, wow, like, God was there, and he was amazing, and he saved me. And then I found out that, unfortunately, they hadn't been able to save all of my right leg, and they had to amputate the foot. And I was devastated. Sport was my dream. That was what I lived for. That was my life. And I just thought this was not part of the deal. Why would you save me and then take away the one thing that I loved the most? Sport. That was who I was. I mean, what am I going to do now? So that was a really difficult, it's just this really weird, and granted, again, I'm on a lot of morphine at the time. And so it was just this weird week where you're kind of aware, kind of not, dealing with all these crazy emotions, and you're not quite yourself. And I just remember this real wrestling with God, and just, I don't understand. I'm so thankful I'm still alive, and yet I'm so angry at you for having my foot amputated. It was tough.
It sounds really, really tough. And as you speak about it with hindsight, obviously that's with a kind of more mature adult, but you were 15 at the time, wrestling with all of that. It's still young, isn't it? As you said, in your whole kind of life journey. Did you hear from God when you were arguing with him and just trying to say, what, this wasn't the deal? Did he respond in any way? How did he answer?
It wasn't in the sense of, some people hear from God really clearly, really specific words. And at some points in my life, I have. But in that sense, it wasn't that I got a word, but there was a lot of peace. And I can only describe it as I know that he was in that recovery room. And it was an interesting lesson it was just an interesting that I learned that, you can be both completely full of faith and hope in God and still have questions and doubt and be angry. And I just lived in that tension. And I had an incredible sense of just hope. Like, this situation really sucks right now. This is not what I want. But I also knew I wasn't going to stay here. Things would get better eventually. It might take a really long time. So I can only describe it, as this weird tension of I'm at incredible peace and yet there's incredible uncertainty. And I'm just going to have to keep walking with this.
And as you did journey on in terms of your faith journey, but also your physical recovery, what did you then do? Bearing in mind you had those dreams to play rugby, and what next?
Do you know what? I mean, it sounds really weird, but it was actually such an incredible experience at 15 to be in a scenario where you were so clear on what was important in life. My life changed dramatically in the space of, a few seconds. But the thing was, when something that dramatic happens, there's just this clarity. And, life was so simple. All I had to do at that point was I needed to get physically better and I needed to learn to walk again. That was it. Everything else that stressed me out, fell away. I didn't care about grades, really, the things most teenage girls care about, that I gotta have the latest, whatever it is. It was just amazing to be totally freed from all of those worries. And because, just that change had been so dramatic, I knew, okay, look, my life is not going to look as it used to. There's no hope of it ever looking like that. So what do you have right now? How are you going to make the best of it? Let's go. And that was it. There was actually an incredible simplicity in it that sometimes I look back in life and I miss. And I think, and again, it was a really, really hard part. There were, a lot of, kind of breakdowns and just temper tantrums and that sort of thing, because you're just trying to deal with these really huge emotions. So I'm definitely not trying to make out like this was a lot of fun, particularly for someone else who was going through a really tough time. But equally, there was a joy in the simplicity and just kind of those tiny little milestones, like, being able to learn to use crutches and get up and down stairs. And so, it was a strange time.
And do you remember how your relationship with God was developing during that recovery time? Can you take your mind back at all?
I think we were learning a lot. Well, he already knew me. I was learning a lot about him. And I think, sometimes we develop an image of God and we almost make up this person that doesn't actually exist. And he was breaking down a lot of the things that I thought that I knew about him and what I thought a Christian life, would be. And, just kind of realizing things like being a Christian doesn't mean you're never going to face hardship. You don't get a free pass from that. And, it's something that is it takes all of you. And It's really slow. My goodness, sometimes God is so slow teaching lessons, and just realizing this is not going to happen in a day. This was an extensive 4 or 5 year process where, I started exploring my faith and started, like I say, realizing that there was, probably thousands of people that I didn't even know that were praying for me just because of, friends at school who were praying and had prayer chains going. And it was also kind of, again, that spirit or that sense of peace that I felt so palpably in my room. I wanted to know more about that, and just learning about the Holy Spirit and the different ways that, he can show up in life, and the different ways he speaks to people, and just really just starting to pay more attention. And so I think, a lot of it was just getting rid of some of those, I guess, really childish understandings of God. Oh, like he's Santa Claus, or he's a journey, or I'm going to pray and suddenly God's going to do exactly what I ask him to do. And you realize, no, like God is wild and he is untamed, but he's good. And realizing, I don't control him. I can speak to him. He will always, always be with me, but he will always stay slightly mysterious and wild. And that's a good thing, because actually, I think I'd be kind of bored with a God that I fully understood. You know what I mean? I'd be kind of disappointed. Like, really, is that it? And these are things I'm still learning about God. And sometimes it's weird. I'll go back and I'll just think, even in my day-to-day life now, something will happen that I didn't want to, and it could be really minor. And I'm just like, oh, this is so annoying. And then I just think, oh, Stephanie, you learned this lesson like 10 years ago, and you're here again. But, God keeps kind of deepening it and deepening it and deepening the lesson. So, like I said, I think he is slow. Or maybe I'm slow and just take a long time to learn it. But it's a slow process, and it's one that you have to commit to every day, and just do the best that you can, and listen and watch for God and for the Spirit and those moments that he wants you to pay attention to.
As you then began to recover and your faith began to slowly grow, but as you say, it's a really slow burn at times, isn't it? How comfortable did you begin to feel in your new body? Because when you're a young teenager, body is really tough, isn't it? Particularly as a female, to get your head round and be comfortable with. Was there a journey in that for you?
Yeah, I think that was one of the toughest things. Just looking in the mirror and just not kind of seeing what you want to see. It took a really long time to accept this is how I was now going to look. And no, I didn't. You don't get an artificial leg right away, because when you have your foot amputated, so you're now, feet are amazing in terms of the skin on the bottom of them. It's different from anywhere else in your body, and that's because it has to deal with a lot of pressure. Your ankle, your foot, the way they distribute the pressure when you walk and when you run. So now I needed to wait for all the scars to heal, but also for the skin to toughen up, because it's now having to do a job that it was never designed to do. And so initially I would just go around on crutches, and there was nothing there. And I remember meeting my prosthetist for the first time and just asking, like, I know I'm not going to be able to walk on it, but can you just make some sort of foam foot so that when I go around, people aren't just staring and thinking, oh my goodness, there's nothing there, because it was just so exhausting. And Shane, he was my first prosthetist, and he was brilliant. And he looked at me and he said, I can, but I'm not going to, because I think it's really important that this is now who you are, and you need to accept that. I mean, it sounds kind of harsh now, doesn't it? But actually, that was the best thing. It was essentially, you need to live in reality. Like, that's how you deal with things, and that's how you move on. And just because it's hard, it doesn't mean that you avoid it. And I realize now it was probably one of the kindest and best things that he could have done in that moment. But still, it's hard. But my mom was great. I remember, we were in a mall. And again, I was just tired of everybody staring, and she could just see. And, she's like, are you okay, Steph? I'm like, well, it's just exhausting. Like, everybody is staring. And she said, yeah, well, your hair looks awesome. Why wouldn't they be staring? And I'm like, oh, yeah. And it was just kind of, again, just that reminder. I think what she was getting at, in my whole life, it has never, been my goal to fit in.
And so did you put your dreams then on hold for that kind of career in rugby or your love for sport? Did you have to just put that away and think, oh, well, that was for a different Stef? What happened?
In many ways, yes. And yeah, actually, it's a good question to ask, because I'm very... it goes back to that thing that Shane, my prosthetist, taught me. It's really important to live in reality and look at the opportunities that you have around you. And so often I will have, if I go in and speak at a school, sometimes I'll have this discussion with a head teacher who want me to come and bring the message that you can do anything that you put your mind to. And it's just not something that I can get behind, which sounds really harsh, but that's reality. It would be terrible advice for me. What if I told you, my dream is to go to America and play in the NBA? And you said, yes, follow your heart, you go and do that. That's terrible advice. One, I'm not a man, I can't play in the NBA. Two, I'm 5'6". I love basketball, but that's not, we all live in a context. And so it's important to respect that context and accept that God has put you here. What can I do here right now? So in that sense, it was tough. I loved sport, but at that time, it simply was not going to be where my future was.
These days, you can't get a lot for your pound. You could get a pack of balloons, a DIY face mask, or some plasters. Ouch! Or £1 could get you great reporting, brilliant interviews, and loads of Christian news articles, all in Premier Christianity. In print, online, and on the app. For just £1 a month in the summer sale limited offer. Get yours at premierchristianity.com.
I could have lost every limb on my body and I still would have been me. I'm the same person. I'm super determined. I'm competitive. I want to do my best. And I won't have that same outlet in sport, but there are other outlets. The world is a huge, wild, big place. And at that point, as 16-year-old, I decided that I was going to, really invest in my academics. I'd always been really academic. I love school. And now, all that energy that I used to put into sport, I turned towards my academics. And I developed a new dream and a new goal. Actually, I wanted to be a doctor. My surgeon was amazing. And I thought, if I could do that for someone else, that would be a life really well spent. And so I ended up actually getting a full academic scholarship to study biochemistry. And I was still in Canada at the time, and you have to do an undergraduate degree before you can apply for medical school. And that was a new plan. And things are going really well. I said I had the scholarship. I wrote my MCATs, which is the entrance exam to go to medical school. Did really well on those. And then, would you believe it, sport ended up coming back into my life.
So what happened? Share with us. How did it resurface?
So I didn't really know very much about Paralympic sports. I didn't know much about blades. And when I went to university, it just kind of coincided with the time that there was a girl on my dorm room floor who was involved in athletics. She was a sprint hurdler. And, I had done a little bit of running, kind of my day leg and kind of a mocked up jogging blade. And, it was tough just because, again, it took a few years for the bones and the skin to be able to tolerate that. And I really enjoyed it, but equally, I just didn't think I was that good. And so I kind of thought, well, I'll just do this recreationally and it'll still be a part of my life. It just won't be the focus. But then I found out about these amazing, running blades, and I realized I was just running in the wrong thing. I got a hold of one of the running blades and started training with this university team, and just kind of realized, oh, I'm actually I'm not bad, and just kind of kept progressing and training, and I got to the point where I needed to make a decision in 2006. Am I going to go to medical school, or am I going to pursue this absolutely ridiculous dream of being a sprinter with one foot? bearing in mind, again, this is 2006. This is before London 2012. This is before people even knew what the Paralympics was. So it really was a bit nuts. And in the end, I decided that medical school would have been really hard, but I was quite academic. I knew that I could get through it. I had no idea if I could make this, idea of being a sprinter who's an amputee work, and I had to find out.
And so did you start running and then begin competing quite quickly?
No, it definitely took some time. Again, I hadn't done very much in 4 or 5 years. So apart from the amputation, I was simply out of shape. I had to get back into shape, and I had to learn how to use this artificial leg. But I think people spotted the potential quite quickly. And it was actually a meet in 2006 here in Manchester, here in England. I flew across for, and it was my first international meet. And obviously they were, Great Britain has started this series called the World Cup in preparation for London 2012. And it was the first time I had ever, won. Somebody paid for me to go to this meet. I'm like, this is crazy. I don't have to pay for this flight. But, just getting to the Manchester Stadium, and, it was a big meet. Like, people were watching. And that was a moment where I kind of just could see parasport, like this could go somewhere. And I want to be a part of it. And that was when I made the decision, I can't do both. I don't want to do both medical school and training and kind of do two things mediocre. And that's just not me. I am all in, or I am nothing. There's just not much middle ground for me. And looking back now, it's just this crazy story of, just kind of thinking that something was gone, sport was gone. I made my peace with it, and then, God bringing it back into my life in the most unexpected way, and I've just had the best time.
And in terms of your faith now, when you are competing, is there kind of a rhythm of prayer around event days? Are you on the starting line kind of praying to God, or how do you kind of speak and be with him during those really intense moments?
That has been a really hard journey. And it's something that, it can't just happen on race day. Like, that's something I'm working on all the time. Race day is just, it's too late. And it's so hard because, again, faith is so complicated and God is so complicated. And I remember when I first started, I would pray, God, let me win. That was my prayer. But then you just think, well, hang on a second. Like, what if everybody on the start line is praying that? What if we're all Christians? And who's God going to pick to win? And then I kind of went to this point of, well, if God already knows the end result from the beginning and God is in control, he's just going to pick who he wants to win anyway. So why would I bother training? Where does my effort actually come into this? Where does where does God's God's almighty power come into this? And so it's just kind of like, well, does anything that I do make a difference? And so it was just this really, really complicated process of, what does it mean when I don't win? What does it mean when I'm unsuccessful? Does it mean that God doesn't love me? Does it mean that I've, done something wrong? And just kind of realizing that my job, whether I'm an athlete, it doesn't matter what I'm doing, my job is always to bring my best. I need to be able to look at myself, and I need to be able to sit before God and just say, I did everything that I could. And I don't control much beyond that. That is who I am as a human being. And, living in a world where I cannot guarantee the result. I might work unbelievably hard for these next 4 years, or I have been working hard for these 4 years up to Tokyo. And I might wake up with, a stomach bug and just not be able to compete that day. And what will that say about God, and what will my attitude towards that be? Will I still trust him? And I think that is the space where I need to get to, trusting that no matter what, no matter how it looks in this moment, I am getting God's best, even when it doesn't look like it.
I think that's a journey for us all, isn't it? And it's so interesting, your journey to this point, that God has been with you, and that he saved you and healed you in a very unexpected but beautiful way, and yet still we still grapple with it, don't we? And we still question him, and they're all massive questions. And I think it's so lovely how honest you are about the fact that we just don't have the full answers, and it is that faith, isn't it?
Yeah, and I just think, yes, God very much cares about my sporting career, and he cares very much about my results and how I feel about them. I feel like he's used sports in this incredible way to reach me that nothing else could have. I have, just this really, really distinct memory of London 2012, actually, in particular. And I was running the 200 meters, and I was really nervous about it. But I knew, from a realistic standpoint, I probably wasn't going to be on the podium. And so I was really nervous before this race. And I remember being, when you get to the start line, you're kind of led through these tunnels underneath the stadium. And I heard, this was one of the times when I heard very distinctly from God. And he said, "Stephanie, I'm with you, and you are walking on holy ground right now." And I was just like, wow, like what does that mean? And before I'd actually sat with my friend James, who happened to be one of the chaplains at, like, an official one at London 2012, and we'd actually prayed before this race, and he'd received a message from God, and he just said, I need you to sit here just for 5 minutes, and I just want him to impress it upon you. And it was basically, Stephanie, when you were announced in that stadium for the 200 meters, and as would always happen, the crowd would just go crazy. Imagine 80,000 people cheering just because they've seen the GB vest. And he said, when that crowd cheers for you, I want you to know that is what the angels do in heaven when your name is spoken. And that was just like, wow. And I got to the start line, and the crowd went crazy, and I remember that. And in the end, I came fourth, and I had a new personal best, and it was an amazing, amazing race. And I know God used that moment specifically to speak to me.
And just to clarify, because it's confusing given your background, Team GB,
yeah,
that was a choice, was it?
Yes, yeah. So I have 3 passports. I have a New Zealand passport because I was born there. I have a British passport because both my parents are British. And I have a Canadian passport because just through naturalization, because I had lived there for a long time. So technically, yes, I have 3 options in terms of countries that I compete for. But I am part of Team GB.
And so I think you've mentioned that you go into schools and you've done a TED talk, you've done kind of inspiring talks, but you're also an ambassador for Leprosy Mission, and you've been abroad to visit one of the hospitals, was it there?
Yes. So I'm an ambassador for Leprosy Mission UK, and kind of how that came about. It's kind of a funny story. Again, God speaks in really unusual ways. So my husband is a huge fan of the Marvel movies, and this would have been back when I think a new one was coming out, and I kind of like them, but he doesn't like going to see them with me unless I've rewatched the previous one, because he gets really annoyed from the theater being like, "Brent, I don't get this." So he's like, "You need to research and then you can come with me." So I was doing my research, and I was actually watching Doctor Strange. And in Doctor Strange, there is a scene where he's been injured and he's looking for healing, and he ends up going to Kathmandu in Nepal. And I was watching this film, and I remember saying, wow, that'd be so cool. I would love to go to Kathmandu one day. And then literally the next day, I got an email from Leprosy Mission UK asking if I would be interested in going with them to Nepal to help host some of their social media storytelling they were going to be doing about this incredible goal that they have, which is Heal Nepal. And I responded immediately saying, yes, I'm in. I remember them coming back being like, is she for real? She has no idea who we are, and she's going to come with us to Kathmandu. But I'm like, yes, like this is right. And it was fantastic because they are, prayer is a huge part of what they do, and which is really powerful to be an ambassador for a charity that supports all faiths, but is driven through prayer. And they have this vision, which is to eradicate leprosy from the world. And a lot of people think leprosy is an ancient disease that doesn't exist anymore. But it's not. It's still around. and we know very little about it. I remember my first question being like, do I need to be worried about contracting leprosy? Which I think is a fairly reasonable question, because part of the mission, it was twofold. One, we were fundraising to help rebuild the leprosy hospital in Anbadan, which was... It took a lot of damage during the earthquake that happened in 2015. And it is a hospital that specializes in treatment for leprosy. But in addition to that, we were also raising money to, having that hospital there is fantastic. But the thing with leprosy is that if you catch it early enough, and you treat it, it is entirely treatable, entirely curable. You don't have any long-standing disability from it. It's literally a course of pills, and that's it. It's done. But the thing is, you need to have people going out into the rural parts of the community, and you need people identifying it early enough. And so as part of this mission, they have trained up over 13,000 health workers that are going into the remote parts of Nepal, and they're going to be identifying these people early. Before it has a chance to, cause things. Again, the link was obviously I'm an amputee. If leprosy is left untreated, that generally tends to be the end result. But the other thing that really drew me to this disease is, one, it doesn't, and this is just my point of view, it doesn't seem to get the same kind of awareness or support that other illnesses would. Something like cancer, it doesn't discriminate. Anybody is susceptible to it. And so, you tend to have, a lot of support in the media or from celebrities. Leprosy, on the other hand, this is a disease of poverty. 95% of people are naturally immune to it. And for those that aren't, it is a disease that can come when your immune system is weak. And that's because you're malnourished. And you don't have the ability or the hygiene or the food, that sort of thing, available. And so it often gets disregarded. And the other really hard thing about this disease is the stigma associated with it. Not only do you end up with a physical illness, it's the community that you lose. And to me, this just speaks volumes of this is what God came to do. He came to restore community. And this is just such a brilliant and practical outworking of what that will look like.
More.
More.
More. More.
More.
More.
We often want more, but is it always a bad thing? Isn't wanting more knowledge a good thing?
What about more understanding?
More perspective.
More wisdom.
More action.
More inclusion. Discover more of the good things at the brand new Premier Christianity magazine website. So much more than a monthly magazine, Premier Christianity website helps you go deeper in your faith and is full of inspiration of what God is doing in the world today.
It's Premier Christianity, but so much more.
Register today at premierchristianity.com.
premierchristianity.com.
And am I right in thinking you asked them to make you a prosthetic limb, or you tried one while you were there?
Yes. So this, an Andaman hospital is amazing. It's full service. So not only will they'll do the surgery there if it's required, and not just amputation, not just surgery of amputation. For example, leprosy will often affect your hands, and it almost causes them to lock up. And it doesn't mean that you have to have your hands amputated, but there's now special surgeries that you can, the surgeon goes in and he actually just releases some of the tendons that are holding it. And this really matters because, especially if your trade is as a laborer, you really need your hands to work. And again, this, it's a gift of independence that you're being given. So the hospital does that. They do the recovery, they do the physiotherapy, and they make limbs for people who need them. And, I was kind of, to be honest, they asked if I would be up for having a limb made for me. And my initial reaction was, I'm not sure, because, I'm very fortunate. I have a lot of my running limbs, and my day leg is made by a fantastic private clinic. And so I just thought, okay, I'm going to go to this clinic that is on the side of a mountain. They don't have a lot of equipment. What am I supposed to say? It's going to be on film. I'd have to be honest. What if it's so uncomfortable I can't even walk in it? I'd have to be honest, and what else am I going to do? And they kind of they just said, look, all we want is for you to be honest. And here's the thing. Either the leg is not great, which is another reason why they need more funds so that they can do better, or the leg is amazing. And it's a beautiful story about how, you can still do a lot with minimal resources. So I said, okay, great. Let's do that. And I was genuinely blown over. It was so good. And the interesting thing is so they actually, at Anandaban Hospital, they cast the same way that I'm casted in a private clinic. And again, Sir Richard, my prosthetist, he has always been a big fan of doing hand casting, because he believes that, making a prosthetic limb is not an exact science, because one, the limb changes, it's not the static thing. And so he wants to feel the bones. He wants to feel where the tissue is, the quality of the tissue, and he designs that leg to take that into account. And it's a very hands-on, probably a relatively low-tech way to do it. And amazingly, the guys at Anandaban do it the same way. And they probably were not, they didn't go through the same training that Richard does, but they've been doing this for 30 years. And it was this amazing story of his dad did it and he trained him. And I could tell instantaneously when he put his hands on my residual limb, he knew exactly what he was doing, exactly what he was feeling for. Also, bear in mind, they did this in 2 days. There were no test sockets. Usually you'll have 2 or 3 test sockets just to put on and check and see that the fit is right. One go. And he also, again, this is amazing, he eyeballed the alignment, because again, we did it with the exact materials they would use, which meant that right now I'm wearing what I would call, it's called a flex foot. It's a carbon foot. We used basically the equivalent of a wooden foot. And so you don't have the luxury of having these different adaptations and things you can adjust. So they made this limb one time, unbelievably comfortable. And I thought, well, I'm going to walk in this. And again, the way it's so incredible, because again, remember, they are making limbs for people that legitimately live on top of mountains. And, they are not walking across this lovely, neat pavement we see right now. I mean, they're walking across wilderness. That's who they are catering to. And so I went up and down the mountain on it. And the way that this wooden foot was designed, it basically was almost like a rocking chair. And so it gave you the effect of a flex foot, but probably cost, maybe 2% of the price. And so it was just so amazing to see what can be done with limited resources and a little bit of creativity. And I just think, what an amazing lesson to the world. At some stage, I wouldn't be surprised if it's the NHS going to places like Anandaban to learn, how do we make do with limited resources? How can we do better? And for me, that was just one of the best things to know, that this is a hospital where you go. They may not have a lot, but they have quality. And these patients are receiving quality medical services, advice, equipment. It is amazing.
It's a busy season for you, as we've said. You're training hard for Tokyo 2020, hopefully.
Yep.
But let's pray yes. Just kind of, I know I have to leave you to get on with your training schedule, but what does a day look like for you in terms of training and in terms of your relationship with God throughout it? Is there a particular rhythm you follow?
Yes, I'm definitely someone that loves routine as much as possible, but just the nature of what I do in terms of the training, but also if things go as I would like, I love just doing my devotions in the morning. And, it really ranges. So sometimes it's, I'm just really digging into scripture. Sometimes I am simply reading through books. Sometimes, I will bring out some of my fancier studying tools, like my interlinear, and, really, really diving into a practice. I actually find I really love academic study, and sometimes that blends into it. Sometimes it's about reading just different books. And I don't know, sometimes it's really helpful to have something phrased or put in a different way by someone else. And so I like to spend a good, 20 to 30 minutes doing that. And then I sometimes I will just pray freely, but I actually find it really helpful to write letters, because I kind of have a journal, and it's kind of, a letter to God, and it just really helped me to pay more attention and be more intentional with my words. But the great thing is as well, at the end of the week, you can look back through it, and you just see the different themes, and it just makes you aware of what you were doing throughout the week, and things that God really did answer. Alongside that, I find being discipled incredibly important. I had one of the most amazing discipling experiences. If you have just kind of just stuff in your heart you need to sort out, and you don't sort it out, it affects everything else that you do. And what I do, like, the pressure is extreme. I have to have all of my mental capacity available for me. I've sometimes had situations where, I'm going to a meet, and, for example, I don't know, maybe my husband Brent and I, we had a bit of a fight, and I just find, you know what, I cannot focus on this until I've sorted this out with Brent, because I don't want to go to the meet, divided. And I think it's really important. We need to pay attention to our hearts, and God, he loves our hearts, and he wants them, to be whole and to be good, and not to be just having, I don't know how, it's just that sense of just ugliness in it. And when you feel that, that's usually a sign. God's saying, I want you to pay attention to that. Like, I need you to name it and to look at it, because then we can deal with it. And that is a process that you have to do every day. And as we already said, it's slow. It's slow. You cannot cram it all into, one great weekend away. It's a discipline, and it's also, it's a joy.
Yeah, it sounds like there's two things that really run closely together there: a discipline of faith and a discipline of your sport.
I think part of the reason why God set me again on this path of sport is he just knew this was the best way to teach me some of the lessons that I needed, and just to deal with some of the struggles that I have. Things like failure. I mean, you fail all the time in sport. And so it's one of those things. Sometimes I think he just went for, immersion therapy. I'm just going to inoculate her so much against this, just so she realizes I don't care. If she doesn't finish all the time, failure is a great tool in order to learn how to grow. And yes, I think God has done that on purpose. And, sport won't be forever. And I sometimes think, God, I'm like, what do you have for me next? But this was a phase of preparation for what I don't quite know, but that's exciting.
And that's all we've got time for on the profile this week. Please do join us again next week.